I'm 30 years old and today I met my biological father for the very first time. Since sharing my adoption story, I knew it was going to be a long journey to find my biological family, but here I am, on the other side of the world, from Australia to London. On Mother's Day last year, I posted this video. Hey, I'm Ryan and I've never met my biological mother. I'd love to be able to look my birth mother in the eye and just say how thankful I am for literally everything. She gave me my life and I feel like the least I can do is let her live hers. I just wanted to say thank you for everything and I hope you have a great Mother's Day. Most people take it for granted, but for me, I've never met anyone with the same blood as me. I've never met anyone that looks like me before, and until posting that video, I didn't even know anyone that had the same views on adoption as me. But since that video, everything's changed. I've got messages from right around the world, from other adoptees just like me, from lots of birth mums sharing their stories. But what's really changed my life was all the encouragement to do an Ancestry DNA test. So I'm 99% European, very European, 62% Irish.
Yeah, that explains the beard.
Yeah?
The red beard. And the blue eyes, probably.
But what's really changed my life now was giving those results to CC Moore. CC Moore is a DNA detective and host of American TV show Finding My Roots. She's the best at getting results and building out family trees to find out who you're related to. And after lots of round the world Skype calls, she found my biological father. My birth father doesn't have Facebook and I didn't have an email address, so I decided to write him an old-fashioned letter. But how do you start and how do you write a letter to a birth father who probably doesn't know you exist? Is it the opposite to Star Wars with a, "You are my father," or do you do it a more subtle yet specific, "Oh, hey, what were you doing 9 months before June 28, 1987? It took me about a week to finally write the letter, then I posted it and sent it off to London and crossed my fingers. And then a week later, I received an email. "I'm so sorry I've missed being part of your life. I'm from the USA, but I'm currently working in London. If you want, I'll book you and your family flights over here. You can stay with us because what's mine is yours. We can spend the festive season together as this is truly a Christmas miracle." I could not believe how generous he was with his response. My family was so excited for me. Mum and Dad were pumped, my cousins were going crazy, and my grandma even had a champagne at 10 a.m. in the morning. But blood related or not, they're my family. I love them and they love me, and nothing's ever gonna change that. But having their support through this has been incredible. My mum was so excited, she packed her bags and came with me. After 25 hours of travel, I finally arrived in the home of bad weather, old pubs and terrible coffee, London. And 30 years after being born, 7 months after posting that video, 5 months after doing the Ancestry DNA test, I'm about to meet my biological father for the very first time. My birth father has a high-profile job and likes to keep his face off social media, which is fine. We're both very flattered and humbled that people have an interest in our story. This wasn't just about making a video. This was about me meeting someone from my biological family. And at 30 years of age, I've now met someone who has the same blood as me. I've met someone who looks like me. I've met someone with the same DNA as me, and I no longer have to go to the doctor and not be able to answer the medical questions about family history and feel really embarrassed and sheepish about it. After we met for the first time, my mum and Bridget asked, was it emotional? Was it awkward? And the reality was, it was quite underwhelming. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. To anyone else, it would have just seemed like two old mates catching up for a coffee. He told me about his around the world backpacking trip in the 80s that led to this, and he told me about my birth mum. He said she was caring, he said she was beautiful, and she even made him a mixtape before he continued on with his travels. My birth father also told me about why he stopped playing lacrosse. He said he had a dodgy left shoulder and he had to keep getting surgeries and he was really annoyed by it, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing because he showed me a scar on his left shoulder that looked exactly the same as this one on my left shoulder as well. I couldn't believe it. We had so many similarities and we had such a great time. Later that night, we caught up for dinner and we ended up having beers and dinner every night for the whole week I was in London. At first, I was surprised about how welcoming and generous and warm he was, but now that I know him, I'm not really surprised at all. He's a genuinely lovely man, really chilled out, took really good care of us and has a great sense of humor. He's actually quite quirky. But when he found out about me the first time, he was actually quite annoyed. He was annoyed that no one had told him earlier because he felt like he'd let me down. He was scared I'd be disappointed in him for being that absent father. But he hasn't let me down, and I'm certainly not disappointed in him. He didn't know I existed, and I assumed that would be the case, so how could I be mad? He went on to meet his wife and have a great life himself. And my mum and dad, they couldn't conceive and were told they couldn't be parents. And they've now been my mum and dad for 30 years, and I've lived a great life. It's a good news story for everyone. My adoption story, like a lot of adoption stories, is a good news story. And I'd love it if you shared this video because I really want to encourage people who are nervous about finding their biological families to go for it. I know it's hard, and I know that not every result will be a great result like I've had now. But for me, not knowing, not finding out, not trying, not having closure, that would be harder. Meeting my birth father has been incredible. I never thought it would ever happen, and the only regret I have is that I didn't do it 5, 10, 15 years ago. But believe it or not, that's just the beginning of this story, because my birth father was actually able to introduce me to someone who I never thought I was going to meet either. This is just the beginning of this story, and it's an incredible one, and I'll share the next bit with you shortly.